Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth installment of my development log for my programming language. It's been a while since my last upload because I've been busy with working on both the language and other things and just generally being lazy, but this is it. This is the fourth installment of my development log video series. I sure hope you can't hear the background noise. Anyway, I've done a lot of improvements on the language since my last video. One of those improvements is, well, actually a lot of those improvements include having rewritten a lot of old things that, well, they're not technically old, but they were written a few months ago or were written when the project was in even earlier development, so they weren't really ready for this newer stuff. So basically what I have here is an example of most things I've done and not everything. Some of the things I've improved on have been strictly in the code and are not necessarily visible in what you type in. It's just slight improvements or things that make generally everything possible. That is also something. One thing that's not visible here though is grabbing input. I don't believe I fully fixed that yet, however, so that will be another video. I think input was possible before, of course. It's just some things changed, or some things have changed, and it's in a very not working state currently. But anyway, let's go over what this code will do. So this is the first time I've actually shown any comments. That's because with the old parser and, well, I guess the old interpreter as well, it didn't handle comments too well. This time it will. It just won't parse them at all. It will just ignore anything that starts with 2 slashes. Inline comments have not been worked on at all, but inline comments would just include having basically doing something like this. There we go. This won't work. It will eventually, but anyway, let's remove all of that. So anyway, let's go over what this code does. It creates a function, which we went through last time, and it calls it main, which is a required function. You have to have a main function in order to for the program to even start, and it returns a number. Then we go over to print, and we do a function called inside of the print function call, which is we basically call a function called test, and that we're sending that function an argument here, which is just test. So now we go down here, which is the test function. It basically, as it says, returns inserted string and adds 1, 2, 3 onto it. So here we have the definition of it, function test, and here we have something I didn't show last time, which I've added since that video, and it's arguments. So this function takes the argument string s, which means it gets passed a string, in this case test, and that is upon execution of the function made into a variable inside a function called s. And this function of course returns a string. And the only thing this function does is return, which means it sends back whatever comes after onto here. So instead of printing test, it will print whatever is sent out of this function. And in this case it prints or returns s and adds 1, 2, 3 s and adds 1, 2, 3 onto the end of it. And then it ends the function. And when the function is ended, it will finish this command and move onwards to the rest of the code. So what I do here is I create a boolean, call it b, and I set its value to false. Then I print the value of b and say b is equal to, and I print the value of b right there. And this is a new statement right here. I'm not aware of it existing in any other language, but it's basically the equivalent of a one-line if statement, albeit maybe a bit less powerful than a one-line if statement. But in Visual Basic in C#, I think you can do it in many languages, but specifically Visual Basic works in a similar way. You say, let's see here, in Visual Basic you do if x is equal to y, then, and then you, I guess, return true. This would work in Visual Basic where you say, alright, if this happens, then continue reading this line, otherwise just don't. And the statement I have right here, which I call to set, which I call I call this statement a set to when statement. It says set the variable b to the value true when 1 does not equal 0. And since that is a true statement, it will set b to true. And if we had, for instance, 1 does not equal 1, then it would not do this. It would return false and just skip to the next line. So basically this is me adding some things that are required for me to eventually be able to add if statements, like full-on if statements that are of multiple lines. And one of the things I needed to add for that was this little thing. I needed the math class, which I'm calling JM Math, to be able to understand operations. So I'm calling that function perform. So what it basically does, it gets the operator it gets two values, the left side and the right side, and the operator. The operator could be a less than sign, a more than sign, an equal to, a not equal to, less than or equal to, or more than or equal to, and maybe something more in the future, but those are the most common operators. And it will basically do it. It will perform it. It will say, okay, we have 1, and we're checking to see if it's not equal to 0, and if it's equal to 0, it will return false, but if it's not equal to 0, it will return true, in which case it does that. And then we go on to print the value of b again, just to show that it actually does update. And the last thing it does is create a variable n with the type number, and it sets its value to 2 plus 2 times 2 times 2. If you remember, this is something that didn't work in earlier versions of the language because it couldn't perform multiple of the same operation in a row, but I completely rewrote how it does, well, even string operations and mathematical operations, so that it now understands that, well, basically what it does, when it's found one of the operators of it's looking for, it will start all over again. It's not necessarily the most efficient, but it does allow me to change the values on the fly, which means that it will get the changed value and it will continue on where it was. Not the most efficient, but it works. And if this is correct, it should output the number 10. Since 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times 4 is, no, 2 times 4 I guess works, but it's actually 4 times 2 is 8, and it will add 2 onto that, so we get 10. And then it just prints n is equal to, and the value of n. So, if we go ahead and run this, as you can see, we have test 1, 2, 3, then it prints the value of b. In between here, it will do the set to when statement and print the value of b again, which is changed to true. And then it prints the value of n, which is 10. Which means that all of that worked without a problem, and it left the execution with xcode 0x0. And we're back here again. So not only does it ignore blank spaces, which it didn't before, and comments, but there are significant improvements to, well, basically everything. I think a lot of things have been rewritten. It will understand, as I showed up here, it will understand arguments within arguments. To an extent, it doesn't continue on too well, since it doesn't like that, but that's something for a later update. But anyway, yeah, this is the current progress, and thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next development log or other video I make.